Good morning. Hope you're doing really, really well out there. This is going to be a reply to Neil, who just emailed me a couple of hours ago. And firstly, I want to say thank you for reaching out. And, if I didn't have anybody emailing me like you did, Neil, then this channel wouldn't really bring any value. So I'm super, super grateful, to be honest with you, for your email and everybody else that's emailing me or leaving comments. And the second thing, before I read the email and comment on some things, I just want to say, like, when and this goes to, this is to you, Neil, and anybody else listening, like, when things are really, really poor, like when you had a stretch of like sleepless nights and things are worse than ever, that is actually the time where you should do as little as possible. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive, because like when things are really bad, that's when we obviously are motivated to do something. But then what happens is, if you kind of take action when your sleep is worse than it's ever been, then that action kind of just becomes a spotlight. It really focuses attention on the fact that sleep is so poor, and you're already in this like hyper aroused state where you're like, easily frazzled. You're like, really thinking a lot about your sleep, and then you're gonna start like monitoring the effects of that thing you're changing in this vulnerable state, which often like puts you into this super turbo mode where you don't sleep at all. I guess so. Kind of like paradoxically, like when things are really, really bad, that's not a good time to like change things or like take action, etc. So if you, Neil, decide to like kind of implement some of the CBTi techniques, I think that's totally fine, as long as you're aware of like the fact that when you do something when things are really poor, that can initially like actually kind of worsen things, because you start monitoring how that thing is going to work. And so I just want to comment on that. And then if you would do like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to implement anything until I have like a recovery night and things are like a little more settled, that also makes perfect sense. So just wanted to say that, because that's honestly, I think, the most important thing I'm going to say in this episode. So now that said, let's read this email, and we'll go over several things. It came in 4 hours ago. Daniel, I found your videos yesterday, and I feel like there may be some hope to what I felt like, and that what has felt like an odyssey. That said, I'm writing this email to you on the morning of my second night in a row not sleeping, which is a first for me. And to be honest, and I'm terrified, I may never sleep again. Send this email to take a shot in the dark and hope that you reply. Let me give you a little bit of context. I'm a 37-year-old CEO of a medium-sized company, so I have my fair share of daily stress and obligations. Not to mention, I'm a father to an amazing 22-month-old son and husband to a very supportive wife. In terms of my sleep history, I'd always been an early to bed, early to wake person, normally sleeping by 10:30 or 11 and waking up by 5. I would say that since 2014, I probably had a few occasions where I would stay up all night due to anxiety and not being able to fall asleep. But it wasn't until fall of 2018 this really started to become a regular. In general, I'm pretty healthy, eat well, work out 4 to 5 times a week. It would be more if not for my sleep issues, honestly. For the last 8 months, I've been in a pattern of very disrupted sleep. Essentially, I have what I call disaster nights, 1 to 3 hours of sleep, a couple of nights in a row every week, and then I rebound and sleep about 5 to 7 hours for 2 nights in a row and slowly go back down the rabbit hole. This cycle has been non-stop, except for when we took 2 vacations, and I slept incredibly well each night in the hotel. Over the last 8 months, I've tried melatonin, guided meditations, every sleep hygiene technique, and then lastly, when I brought this up to my PCB, recommended CBT. However, I couldn't find a CBTi specialist, and frankly, I don't know what to look for. He eventually gave me a prescription for a benzo, and it doesn't work. I sometimes feel relaxed, but don't really sleep all that well after taking it. I went to see a therapist, and she has me focused on removing my daily stressors, but this honestly isn't helping with my sleep. After Friday's night lack of sleep, I hit YouTube pretty hard and thankfully found one of your videos. I watched about 20 of them yesterday and finally felt I had a solution with sleep restriction. Knowing I'm not a big quantity sleeper, I decided to try it last night and went into bed at 11 and woke up by 5:30. What calms me down is watching a sitcom, as it takes my mind away from being stressed about sleep. So I went to bed at 11, watched a sitcom, and fell asleep as I normally do. Where did I go? Sorry. Normally do during the sitcom for about 50 minutes and could not fall asleep after that. I stayed in bed most of the night, just saying to myself I will eventually fall asleep, and never did. To be honest, I'm pretty terrified that I've been up 2 nights in a row. I look at it though as paying my dues with CBTi to eventually kick this, but I'm concerned when I might crash. 3 days, 4 days? Do I need to take a benzo so I stop freaking out about when I finally build enough sleep drive to crash? Just looking for a little encouragement and confirmation that CBT can work for someone like me. Also, quick technical question. We have a few bedrooms in our I'm sorry. We have a few bedrooms in our house, as sometimes when I can't sleep in our bedroom, I will go to another room and try to sleep there. It drives my wife nuts. Should I stop doing this? Last question. Does the TV I watch in the bed to fall asleep count against the sleep restriction schedule? Last question. If I can't sleep, can I watch TV in bed? If you're unable to reply, I understand, but I want to express my deep thanks for the content you post. I hope it ends up working for me, but literally every video you post gives me some hope I may actually beat this thing. Listen, Neil, starting there, there's absolutely no reason CBTi wouldn't work for you. In fact, I literally think of CBTi as like diet and exercise for weight loss, meaning it is really hard. Most people give up in the first couple of weeks because they don't see results, or they just don't have the kind of tenacity to do it. But if somebody would continue restricting portion size and exercising, they would lose weight. There's no question about it. And the same thing with CBTi. Like if you're able to, if you're able to do it, if you stick with it, then you will get better. In my mind, there's no question about it. So let us actually start from the beginning. I felt there was a lot of things to comment on here. As I was reading it, by the way, I realized that the second night probably, or maybe, was triggered by the fact that you started implementing CBTi after a really poor night. So it kind of goes back to what I talked about in the first thing I said in this episode. So let's see. First thing here. I'm terrified I may never sleep again. You'll be surprised how common this notion is. Like, it's so common for people with insomnia to believe that they may completely lose the ability to sleep, which you cannot. That's impossible. And I think one good analogy that I learned from Martin Reed, he's an insomnia coach and a good friend of mine. He uses this analogy a lot. Like, you can suspend breathing for quite a long time. Like, you can hold your breath for much longer than you would when you normally breathe. But there comes, you can't do it forever. Like, eventually you will have to breathe again. You will start breathing again. Your body just needs that oxygen. And it's the same thing with sleep. Like, you can go without sleep for so long, but eventually, like, your body needs to sleep. You can't completely lose the ability to sleep. It's impossible. So you talked, so one thing you talked about was like, I have my fair share of daily stress and obligations, and now already there, this makes me hopeful. And I think I said this actually very recently in another episode, but you have not gone down that rabbit, there are many rabbit holes, but that rabbit hole of thinking that there is something broken inside your brain, or that you have a kind of a hormonal imbalance or some kind of neurotransmitter abnormality. Like, you see that, like, the stress is the driving force of your trouble sleeping, and that actually puts you in a good spot, because you don't have to peel off all those layers of confusion where people think that they need an MRI, they need a CAT scan, they need like that, because they think there's something like wrong with you. And in fact, when it comes to people with like that, insomnia, there's nothing physically wrong. It's all part of a kind of a thought process that develops in response to not sleeping well, and behaviors that develop in around that. And I felt I wanted to kind of mention that here. Let's go on, and there's a better place for it, which is actually here. I've always been an early to bed and early to wake person. If you watch or listen to episode 107, I talk about what's called the 3P model, which explains how insomnia develops. And it basically goes like this. Some people are more predisposed to insomnia than others. And one of the things that make you predisposed is having what's called an extreme sleep preference. I mean, yours doesn't sound very extreme, but you still have, you are an early bird. Like, you prefer like waking up early, and other people are kind of night owls. If you're either of those, you have that, you're predisposed. I don't know exactly why, but having that like tendency makes you predisposed towards insomnia, perhaps because society is maybe working on a different schedule than you, something like that. But I don't know why, but the point is just that tells us that you have that kind of predisposition towards insomnia, which, by the way, there are millions of people out there with predisposition towards insomnia that never have any problem sleeping, because there hasn't really been any precipitating factor, nothing that's kind of like triggered it. And then you go on to mention that like since 2014 it's kind of like started being more of a problem, and definitely the last 8 months. And maybe it is the stress that was like the trigger that took you from just being predisposed to having like this precipitating factor that kicks you into having real trouble sleeping. And then the final P, so the 3P model has 3 Ps, it is like the predisposing, precipitating, and then the perpetuating factors. And those perpetuating factors are really what's important, and because those are the ones that keep the insomnia going. And typically it's like, somebody can't sleep and then react to that. They think this is a real problem, and they say, I'm going to go a bit earlier. That doesn't work. They feel, oh my gosh, something's really wrong. This isn't working. I'm just going to try this other thing. That didn't work either. Now I'm really worried. And then that cycle of like trying more things to sleep, they don't work. You become more stressed. You sleep less, etc. That is insomnia. That's how insomnia becomes chronic. So we talked about that, and then kind of a little bit on your pattern here. Essentially, you said what I have is disaster nights, and then these kind of recovery nights, and everything. When it comes to insomnia, everything is really driven by what's called hyperarousal, or what somebody I had on a podcast, and a guest named Nick Wignall. He's been on 2 talking insomnia episodes, which are both really, really good. Well, he told me just now, I think it was last week, that he calls this like turbo mode, when your brain is in that state of like, just like racing thoughts, and you're trying to figure it out, like you're thinking so much about your sleep and what's happened, etc. And that is the root cause. That is what is driving insomnia. And I know I just said that it is the perpetuating factors, but they're connected. The perpetuating factors are like worrying about sleep, and that causes hyperarousal. So that turbo mode is like the root cause. Now, why do I talk about that? Well, it's because it is easy when you have like that yo-yo pattern to kind of completely focus on like the sleepless nights, but oftentimes those kind of rebound nights are part of the problem too, because partly because you sleep longer. That's a little part of it, that you sleep longer some nights, and then you don't have enough sleep drive for the remaining nights. But it's more like that typically with those like recovery nights, your wake up time shifts. So instead of your usual 5 a.m., you had a terrible night, now you're up 8 a.m., and that has a big impact. And let me quickly comment on that. It's because, let's say somebody like you probably just need like 5 hours and 45 minutes, or let's just for easy math say 6 hours. And that means that if you take 24 minus 6, it takes like a good 18 hours to build up kind of the sleep drive you need to sleep well. So if you normally wake up at, let's say, 6, then 18 hours after 6 is, okay, so let's do this math. So 6 p.m. and 8 hours after that is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. Am I doing this right? I feel like I'm not doing this right. 6 a.m. and 12 hours. We're just going to add 6 hours. I'm sorry for this poor math here. So let's say you wake up 6 hours, but you need 18 hours of sleep to produce a good sleep diet. So that's 12 hours later, 6 p.m. And then we're just going to have 6 hours after that. So that's midnight. So yeah. So if you need 6 hours of sleep and you get up 6 a.m., then probably by midnight is when you like reasonably could be falling asleep on a kind of like when you're at baseline. So if you then wake up at 6 a.m. instead and you need 18 hours of sleep, you can see that then it's going to be at least 2 a.m. before you can sleep. So that those kind of rebound nights, the problem with them is mainly that your wake up time shifts, and that creates a real problem. Okay, now this cycle has been nonstop except for when we took 2 vacations. I sleep incredibly well each night. There's so much things to learn from that too. Well, one is that, and I know this hasn't come across in the email, and I know I commented on that, but that shows us that like, you can sleep. There's nothing wrong with you. You can sleep. And now the reason you slept so well in the hotel, which is also typical for insomnia, is one, the shift of like the physical environment, because oftentimes with a long history of insomnia, like your own bedroom, bed, etc., becomes associated with stress and not sleeping, and then that kind of triggers you at night. So if you're in a new environment, that's good. But I think even more, it is like the distraction from kind of your normal routine, and like you're not, the normal kind of triggers, stress, etc., are less pronounced. You're in a new environment, like mentally, and you're taken, your thought pattern is broken from like is like, I would say broken. It's shifted, like your attention is shifted away from the normal things you do. So that the change in like your inner environment, what you say, is super important, and that's what makes you sleep better there. So that was a comment on that. And then except for vacation, and you said you tried so many things, melatonin, guided meditations, and as you will start to understand, like a lot of times those things that we try, in fact anything we do with the purpose of that making us sleep, will backfire. And now let me go on a little side trip from that too. That's the same thing for CBTi. Like anything we do with a specific purpose of that making us sleep, that just makes us self-monitor, and we wonder, is this going to make us sleep or not? Is this going to make me sleep or not? And that makes us stressed, and we can't sleep. So it's an important point to make that if you approach CBTi that way, like this CBTi is going to make me sleep, then that's going to become another sleep effort, and it's not going to work. I talked about the therapist, and yes, it sounds like that therapist was probably not like a CBTi person. So just comment on that. And the sitcom, anything that makes you distracted from your struggle with sleep is good. Whether that's a sitcom or watching YouTube or reading a book or listening, whatever it is, like doing laundry, whatever it is, like I think anything that distracts you from sleep at night is great. We talked about this. Oh yeah, and you said this one too. I'm concerned when I might crash. 3 days, 4 days, ? We don't know that. But basically the thing is like, the more you wonder when you're going to crash, then the more it becomes a self-monitoring thing. Like, okay, is tonight the night I'm going to crash? Oh, maybe I felt a little sleepy. Yeah, it probably is. No, I woke up. It's not, you know what I'm saying? Like the more we monitor, the worse it is. So the sooner you like are able to not wonder if you're going to crash or not, you're probably going to sleep better. So that's one thing. And a technical question, we have a few bedrooms. Should I stop going to another bedroom? That's a good question. I feel, this is how I feel about it. If you've done a lot of things to sleep better, and sleeping in another bedroom is one of them, and it has kind of helped somewhere, then definitely, like as I pointed out, the first thing I said is like, when things are really, really rough like now, you should make as little changes as possible. So if you have been going to a different room, then you should do that for now. Eventually, of course, you should go back to sleep with your wife, but that's not a priority. So basically, I think the answer here is do whatever you've done. Like, don't change anything. Going to a different bedroom, like, the reason it helps is often that it's kind of like going on vacation. Like, you just change the environment, and you're in an environment where you think less about sleep, and that helps. But eventually you're going to get to a point where you worry less about sleep in general, and you can sleep anywhere. I feel like I didn't quite answer this question, but I hope you get the gist of that answer. Does the TV I watch in bed to fall asleep count against the sleep restriction schedule? I personally, like, people are different when in their approach to like TV and screens, etc. I feel like TV is not a problem at all. And here's the most important thing. If you are in bed and you're watching TV and you feel really relaxed and you're not thinking about sleep, then it's not a problem. If you're in bed and you're watching TV with the purpose of the TV making you sleep, and you're kind of hoping that it will put you to sleep, and you're kind of getting frustrated when it doesn't, then it's not good. Then you should avoid doing that. So I hope that was helpful, and I think that kind of answered all the questions. So yeah, Neil, I'm confident, very confident that you'll do better. Just by the tone of your email here, I can tell that you're going to do really well, and I'm always here. I'm grateful for all emails, so please send me emails. And now, if you are looking for maybe a more like a structured program, a CBTi program, I can warmly recommend Martin, that I mentioned before. He's in episode 108. If you want to like get to know him a little bit, he has a CBTi program that's like online. I think it's an 8-week course, and he has a free 2-week thing too, where you get emails every I think it's daily or something. But anyway, I can warmly recommend his program. So yeah, stay in touch, Neil, and hope this was helpful. And today's Sunday, so I'll be back tomorrow with more content. Okay, take it easy. Bye bye.